My name is Anna Westwinter, and I'm the Executive Director of Save Our Heritage. And I want to thank you all for coming out today as we host the National Trust for Historic Preservation. 21 years ago, in May of 2003, many of us gathered here on the grounds of the Old Manse with the National Trust to hear the late historian David McCullough urge us to consider the action of those who inhabited these grounds before us. Those who called this place their home. Those who prayed for peace but prepared for conflict. Those who sacrificed their lives to advance the cause of freedom. And those that awakened us to the spiritually transcendent power and beauty of nature. McCullough exhorted us to embrace the memory of these people by protecting their hallowed and beloved landscapes. Landscapes that transport us back in time, context, and contemplation. Because, he said, once they succumb to inappropriate development, once the spell, the spirit of these treasured places is violated or destroyed, they're never the same again. You can't bring them back. He added, let the commitment of the people at the bridge in Concord in 1775, the commitment of people like Thoreau and Emerson, be the calling of our time. 21 years after McCullough spoke these words on these grounds, the commitment of these remarkable people still remains our calling. And that is why we are all gathered here today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Christine Morin, Chief Operating Officer of the Trustees of Reservations, who will be followed by Jan Turnquist, Executive Director of Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House, and Strong Medicine Bear.
Welcome to the Old Manse. This special place is one of 123 properties of the Trustees, America's first land conservation nonprofit. The Old Manse has seen so much history, from the second floor windows where Reverend William Emerson and his family witnessed the battle at the North Bridge on April 19, 1775, to the literary revolution that was launched in this community, influencing Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne, both of whom called the Old Manse home. It's also a special place because we are standing on the unceded ancestral lands of Pawtucket, Nipmuc, and Massachusetts people. We honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to the lands on which we gather. As part of the trustees' commitment to build inclusive spaces of belonging, we continue on our journey to learn more about the indigenous histories of our properties and to seek to center the perspectives and voices today and in the future. Next, I'll turn it over to our valued partner, Jan Turnquist from the Orchard House.
I know it looks like I need a wardrobe update. As Executive Director of Orchard House, I do have 21st century clothing. However, today I want to visually highlight Little Women author Louisa May Alcott while focusing on her family home 200 years before the Alcotts purchased it. In 1675, the Reverend Peter Bulkley made a peaceful compact with the Massachusetts Muscataquit people. The name Concord, meaning harmony, was given to the first English inland settlement in America. In 1675, conflict arose as Native peoples saw their numbers and lands diminish. Yet, compassion and kindness sometimes prevail even in the worst of times. A powerful example of this was the extraordinary friendship between the Massachusetts Neshoba praying Indians and the inhabitants of the home now known as Orchard House, who petitioned the General Court and received the right to shelter gravely endangered Neshoba praying Indians on that property. Otherwise, these people would have been shipped to Deer Island, where, with no food or shelter, death was inevitable. To this day, that friendship continues. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend, a descendant of those people, Strong Medicine Bear, a present-day Sagamore of the Neshoba praying Indians.
Montampo Wani, good morning. As the original people and descendants of the Massachusetts nation dating back from pre-colonial period, my family has been in union with these lands for thousands of years. We honor and take care of Mother Earth as she took care of my ancestors and continue to take care of all of us today. Historically, the Massachusetts nation has been a peaceful tribe. Specifically, the praying Indians have always looked to be peaceable from the time of John Eliot to today. Land and historical preservations are so vital to our history and, more importantly, our lives. It is proven that the destruction of natural habitat is the leading cause of biodiversity loss and species extinction. Today, the Natick, Ponkapog, and Neshoba praying Indians find friendship and partnership with organizations like the Orchard House, doing meaningful work preserving land and historical sites. Also, others with us today, like Save Our Heritage, trustees of reservations, and the Walden Woods Project, care about natural habitats, the history we all share, and the human race in general. What happens next will most definitely affect our generations to come. So join us in preserving the future. To Botany, thank you.
Thank you, Strong Medicine Bear. When we gathered back in 2003, the threat to the surrounding historic landscapes by inappropriate aviation expansion, of which David McCullough and the National Trust called out, was measured by the environmental impacts we could see, we could hear, and we could breathe. With the release of An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, we became aware that the premise that our atmosphere was so infinite that we humans could do nothing to significantly affect it. That premise was finally dispelled. Today, climate change is both an inconvenient and an irrefutable truth. The air is warming. The oceans are warming. The planet is warming rapidly. The greenhouse gas emissions we generate today with abandon will live in the atmosphere for thousands of years. And today, as the National Trust has come here to call attention to the unnecessary and unwise plans to expand 522,000 square feet of luxury private jet infrastructure amidst the surrounding 17th, 18th, and 19th century historic sites. We recognize that there is no longer an acceptable need or an appropriate location for a project of this nature anywhere on this warming planet, and that no historic site can be truly protected within an unprotected climate. Now, in speaking of advocates for the preservation of invaluable and irreplaceable historic sites, there is no better partner in the cause of preservation than Deputy Counsel for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Betsy Merritt. Betsy has represented the Trust in nearly 200 cases in state and federal court. She is an extraordinary and talented and accomplished litigator and a thoughtful and compelling advocate and negotiator. Over the course of the past 25 years, Betsy has been a steadfast friend to and ardent advocate for Minuteman National Historical Park, Walden, and the surrounding landmarks. And today, May 1st, she celebrates 40 years of work and devotion to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Betsy, without exception, tirelessly commits her heart and soul to the protection of the very places that make it possible for all of us to, in the words of Ken Burns, listen closely to the ghosts and echoes of our inexpressibly wise past. Please welcome Betsy Merritt.
Thank you, Anna. It's true, today is my 40th anniversary at the National Trust. What a great way to spend it. The National Trust was chartered by Congress 75 years ago, so I've been there more than half the life of the organization. In 1949, we were chartered as a national nonprofit organization working to save America's historic sites, to tell the full American story, build stronger communities, and invest in the future of historic preservation. I'm joining you here today to announce that Minuteman National Historical Park, Walden, and nearby landmarks have been named to the National Trust 2024 list of America's 11 most endangered historic places. Since 1988, the National Trust has worked with communities across the country to identify significant historic places that are threatened and to focus national publicity on those threats. As a result, we have seen this annual 11 Most Endangered Historic Places list serve as a galvanizing force for historic preservation, with more than 350 sites listed over the years and only a handful lost. We've included the Minuteman National Historical Park, Walden, and nearby landmarks on the list of America's 11 most endangered historic places this year because of the proposed major expansion of HANSCOM Field, which directly abuts the Minuteman National Historical Park. This proposed expansion threatens to significantly increase private aviation activity over nearby historic and natural landscapes, dramatically increasing the hangar capacity for private jets by building 17 new hangars and increasing the airport footprint for what would be the largest expansion in HANSCOM's history if it's approved. We join the advocates here today in their concern that the proposed development would lead to increased noise disruption in an area that's already impacted by noise from jet traffic, often interrupting park programming, as well as the potential for increased vehicular traffic and the negative environmental and climate impacts of private jets, which are severe. This proposed development would come at a great cost to the local community and the nation. This area is home to places of great significance in American history, and to this day, visitors draw inspiration from these places. There are almost too many to name. Minuteman National Historical Park, Henry David Thoreau's Walden Pond and Woods, Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House, and of course the Old Manse, our host today, home to Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne. As you've heard, this is not the first time this area has been threatened by proposed changes to HANSCOM Field, and in 2003, Minuteman National Historical Park and nearby historic sites were also included on the National Trust list of 11 most endangered historic places. We hope that listing the site as one of this year's 11 most endangered places will once again spotlight and uplift the message of advocates that this extraordinarily important historic area, which witnessed the beginning of our nation's struggle for independence, is not the right place for a development of this scale and potential impact. Again, the National Trust is including Minuteman National Historical Park, Walden, and nearby landmarks on this year's list of America's 11 most endangered historic places to support the work of Save Our Heritage, the Walden Woods Project, Louisa May Alcott's Orchard House, the Ralph Waldo Emerson Memorial Association, the National Parks Conservation Association, and so many others that are working to ensure the multitude of nationally important historic sites in this area are not significantly impaired by private jet operations. There's an important step that we can all take in the next 6 weeks to help advocate for the protection of these important sites. The Massachusetts Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs has issued a draft environmental impact report. In fact, I was reading this report on the plane last night, flying up here from Washington, D.C., and the man sitting next to me on the plane said, "Hey, I live in Concord, right under the current flight path. We're all vehemently opposed to this project." Well, the state has just extended the comment deadline for this to June 14th. We all need to submit comments opposing this harmful and unnecessary project. Our heritage is more important than private jets. Our comments, just say no. Thank you.
Okay, well, next. I'd like to welcome Paul O'Shaughnessy from the Friends of Minuteman National Historical Park, who will then be followed by Robert Monroe, Dean of Academic Program and Equity at Concord Academy and co-chair of Concord's 250th Anniversary Committee, who will then be followed by Kathy Anderson, Executive Director of the Walden Woods Project.
Good morning. My name is Paul O'Shaughnessy. I'm the president of the Friends of Minuteman Park, National Park. The Friends are the park's nonprofit partner, and we support preservation, education, and events within the park. Minuteman National Historic Park is much, much more than just a beautiful landscape with old houses. It is a special, special place that memorializes the events and the values that led to the founding of this country. That is why I agree. That is why the park hosts visitors not simply from around this country, but from around the globe. The Friends has the pleasure of working closely with the National Park staff. These are dedicated individuals who truly define the concept of public service. They have a true passion for their work. I have seen groups of visitors captivated by the park's educational programs, for example, those that take place right here at North Bridge or at Hartwell Tavern in Lincoln. Imagine what it is like to be a park ranger, providing a program. You're bringing people back into 1775. You can taste it, you can see it, and then suddenly, I don't need to do the sound effect, you've all heard it. Then suddenly, your presentation is drowned out. Or imagine what it is like to be a visitor. You're taking a walk, you're watching birds, you're sitting by the river, and suddenly again, right overhead. And now some people are proposing that this phenomenon should increase. That is unacceptable. It is simply unacceptable. We are moving in the direction opposite from that which we should be moving. We greatly appreciate the National Trust identifying this national park as one of the most endangered historic sites in America. And we agree. The expansion and increased jet traffic of our neighbor will endanger the long-term health of the park, of its landscapes, and of its waterways. Minuteman National Park is a gem. It must be protected and preserved. Thank you.
It's chilly. Just want to throw that out there. But it's warm in energy, and so let's let that wash over us. The 250th anniversary of April 19th, 1775 in 2025 will tell a more expansive, more inclusive story of the events that fired the first shot, signaling the beginning of our journey toward defining the meaning of the words freedom, self-determination, and independence. As we know, the promise of true freedom would evade the indigenous peoples who found themselves displaced from their homeland, the enslaved African Americans, and even the women of our communities. None of these inhabitants of this land could vote or own property, but each would lay down their lives to protect it. 250 years after the events that took place at the bridge right behind us, we will finally tell and celebrate the stories of these unsung heroes. The stories of the people and the places that provide a larger picture and perspective of how the path to freedom wasn't and isn't traveled at the same speed, nor do the paths pose equal obstacles along the way. We have important stories to be told by our newly restored landscapes and structures. Thanks to the Walden Woods Project, Brister's Hill, the homeland and orchard of emancipated African American Revolutionary War veteran Brister Freeman, was saved from development of an office park and is preserved in its natural state within Walden Woods and is open to the public for contemplation and natural observation. The Robbins House, as it stands right across the street, has been painstakingly restored and honors the Revolutionary War veteran Caesar Robbins and his descendants as they navigated post-emancipation the many remaining immovable impediments and the uneven terrain ahead of them in their quest to further the commitment of America to bestow equal rights of liberty and freedom to all of its people. With these important stories to tell, we must join together to protect these landscapes, soundscapes, and climate environment that protect them. The developer for this jet expansion project at HANSCOM is slated to break ground next year, the year of our 250th anniversary. This must not happen. And we thank the National Trust for joining in our efforts to oppose this project and let these landscapes speak their stories and their truth. Thank you.
The Walden Woods Project was founded by recording artist Don Henley in 1990. Our organization is the state-designated Friends of Walden Pond. Because the Eagles are preparing for the European tour, Don was not able to be here with us today, but he asked me to deliver the following message, and I quote, "Today's announcement from the National Trust is a reminder of the enduring responsibilities we bear to preserve our national treasures through vigilant advocacy and unwavering stewardship. Without both, we face the very real possibility that these sites could be forever altered denigrated, or lost for future generations. Critical choices lie ahead. We must choose wisely by prioritizing what is essential for the preservation of the special places that inspire us, embody our history, reflect our values, and define us as Americans." End quote. As we all know, Walden Woods, visited by 600,000 people a year, inspired the seminal writings of author-philosopher Henry David Thoreau. It is a testament to Thoreau's worldwide popularity that 1 in 4 people who visit Walden lives outside the United States. Thousands of students come to Walden every year, and many participate in educational programs held outside along the shores of Walden Pond. There they learn about Thoreau's thoughts on the environment, human rights, and our responsibilities to live in harmony with nature and with those with whom we share the planet. Shockingly, the sound of overhead jets is all too common, interrupting public programming at Walden. Jet infrastructure expansion at HANSCOM would drastically multiply this problem. Many refer to Thoreau as the father of the conservation movement. He knew that our physical and spiritual health is vested in the health of the natural world and our connection to it, not in our domination of it. Thoreau's impassioned call for each individual to resist evil in all its forms is expressed in his essay, Civil Disobedience, a precursor to the passive resistance movement that influenced Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, and many others. Quote, "What is the value of any political freedom but as a means to moral freedom?" Thoreau challenged. Quote, "Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant?" he asked. As we consider the current political landscape in America and the environmental and social reform challenges we face on a global level, Thoreau's emotive words ring true now more than ever. Let us honor and defend the integrity of the iconic place that inspired Thoreau by preserving Walden for future generations as a place to reflect and to reconnect with nature, a place to learn and to foster the next generation of engaged environmental and social reform leaders, and not as a place degraded by the constant roar of luxury private jets. We will now present a video featuring Douglas Brinkley, the CNN presidential historian, award-winning author, and Rice University history professor.
In the late 1940s, American preservationists persuaded Congress and President Harry Truman to create a national organization to protect our country's historic sites and antiquities. This coming October, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of that organization, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Through the decades, the National Trust has effectively harnessed the American public's abiding reverence for our country's rich multicultural history. The Trust has ably conserved and curated multiple landscapes and structures that embody America's values and complicated backstory. But the Trust's mission extends far beyond its own holdings. Since 1988, it has published an annual warning list to raise public awareness about scores of American sacred sites, natural wonders, and historic landmarks that are now, unfortunately, endangered due to rogue commercial development, engineering boondoggles, and more recently, the horrific effects of climate change. In the Trust's history of their 36-year 11 Most Endangered program, this annual attention-grabbing watchdog list has identified over 350 endangered sites. Once the Trust has fired its warning flares, the public has traditionally responded in the affirmative. Only a handful of landmarks have been desecrated. Today, May Day, the National Trust announces its 2024 roll call of America's 11 most endangered historic places. While every site on the list is noteworthy and highly deserving of permanent preservation, one emerges as jarringly symbolic of all the others. The sacred ground around Minuteman National Historical Park and Walden Pond in Walden Woods in Concord, Massachusetts. My friend and fellow historian, the late David McCullough, was once asked about the key historic regions in the United States, and he had this to say: if you could take a lens and put it down on the map of the United States in order to look at the history and the culture of America, and you could only put it down in one place, you would be hard put to find a better place than Concord, because so much is there. So much of our colonial history, of our Revolutionary War history, of the rise of the 19th century industry, and of the railroads, and of course, the immense importance to the literature of our country. What McCullough, who died in 2022, knew was that Concord's Revolutionary War sites, including the North Bridge, where the shot heard around the world was fired, thereby provoking the provincial militia to wage war against British troops, are all protected within the boundaries of the Minuteman National Historical Park. But today, that sacred landscape is threatened by a proposed 47-acre private jet hangar expansion at HANSCOM Field Airport, which abuts the park. If built, the facility would rank as one of the nation's largest luxury private jet hubs. As the American people plan to celebrate the Concord shot that changed the world and the Yankee Doodle heroes of the revolution that sparked our country's founding, we have a citizen's duty to protect the solitude and integrity of Minuteman National Historical Park. Construction mayhem, traffic gridlock, environmental and climate destructive emissions, and sonic noise would replace the ethereal tranquility of Old Concord if this expansion were allowed to occur. It is sadly ironic that the water feature that inspired Thoreau's 1854 masterpiece Walden and his essay Civil Disobedience, which so influenced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movement, is now being harassed by a reckless aviation cabal of jet setters. Private luxury jet travel is the most destructive form of travel when measured by carbon emissions per passenger mile. How destructive? Well, a private jet can emit 7,500 tons of planet-warming emissions in 1 year. Meanwhile, the average person's annual carbon footprint is 4.7 tons, 1,600 times less than that of a private jet. Given our dire need for immediate and drastic reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, it is unconscionable to allow such an aviation monstrosity to be built within this historic area of Massachusetts. If the HANSCOM airport expansion goes forward, the negative impact will not only be felt at Minuteman Park and Walden Pond and Woods, but at the Louisa May Alcott Orchard House, where she wrote and set her beloved novel Little Women. The atmosphere around the Old Manse, once home to Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne, will be permanently altered. Luxury planes will be disrupting the airspace above the Robbins House, which recounts the undersung history of the first generation of free Concord African Americans. All told, the airport's expansion would sully the American people's visitation experience and maul over a dozen National Register and National Historic Landmark heirlooms to boot. Today is a call to action for all of us, private citizens and public officials alike, to prioritize safeguarding our irreplaceable historic sites. The dignity of our sanctified landscapes must not be maligned. Untirable vigilance and fierce engagement are needed now more than ever. By designating Minuteman Park, Walden Pond, and the area's other historic sites among America's 11 most endangered, the National Trust has fired a 21st century shot heard around the world. We must all stop this unsavory expansion. If we, the people, allow this odious jetport enlargement to forge forward, we will be sending a solemn message to future generations that our treasured historic places of today will be tomorrow's runways for the privileged few. Please join me and let your voice be heard. Go to savingplaces.org, and sign the petition to Massachusetts Governor Healy and U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg to stop this unseemly private jet expansion plan and protect these shrines of liberty as we prepare to celebrate the 250th anniversary of America's noble founding.
Our Congresswoman, Lori Trahan, wanted to be with us today, but Congress is in session and there are votes being taken, hopefully. She did send us a statement that she'd like me to read. For generations, Massachusetts families have cherished the tremendous recreational and educational benefits of Minuteman National Historical Park and Walden Pond. These historic sites are so much more than just landmarks. They're treasures that must be protected at all costs. As someone who grew up regularly visiting Walden Pond and Minuteman National Historical Park, this designation from the National Trust is deeply alarming. It's clear that as proposed, the expansion of HANSCOM North Airfield poses serious threats to these sites that are living testaments to some of the most important moments in our nation's history. I'm committed to protecting these sites from harmful and unnecessary environmental degradation, so our grandchildren and great-grandchildren walk the same roads that paved the way to the American Revolution and relive the creation of some of the greatest literary works written by American authors. That's Lori Trahan. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our state representative for the 14th District, Simon Cataldo. Now, Representative Cataldo knows very well the historic sites we are honoring today, as he called this district his home since the age of 3. He has dedicated his life to fighting for special education students, environmental justice, and for integrity in government. We are so honored to have him representing our district. Please welcome Representative Simon Cataldo.
Thank you. There have been a bunch of applauses so far, but I think we haven't yet done one that is pretty important. There are a lot of people who put in a lot of work to make this happen so we could be here, and they did a great job. So Anna and your staff, thank you so much. You did a wonderful job. I'm Simon Cataldo. I represent residents of Acton, Carlisle, Chelmsford, and as Anna said, my hometown of Concord in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. I stand before you on hallowed ground, and I stand between you in hearing from Ashley Judd, so this is going to be pretty quick. I'm one of 5 members of the House of Representatives who represent the land that we're talking about today. We include Alice Peisch of Wellesley, who represents part of Lincoln, Representative Ken Gordon of Bedford, who represents part of Lexington, Representative Carmen Gentile of Sudbury, who represents parts of Lincoln and Concord, and Representative Michelle Sicolo of Lexington, who represents Lexington and Woburn, which should tell you, if anything, that Massachusetts has zealously adhered to one of the most unique American traditions, a tradition that does not appear to be at any risk of all, which is the art of political gerrymandering. But nevertheless, I think that entire delegation understands, respects, and observes the responsibilities, the obligations, the privilege of serving a place that is so rich in American history and so beautiful in its environment. The Massachusetts legislature has taken important steps in the last few years, and I know, looking out at you, a number of you have been a part of these efforts, so thank you for that. Has taken a few important steps. To my mind, most notably, the Public Lands Preservation Act, which has enshrined in our Constitution a no net loss policy on state conservation land, and 2021 and 2022 landmark climate bills, which has made Massachusetts the most aggressive of any state in the nation in its pursuit of net zero emissions policies. But we can't celebrate, because in order to advance that work and not retreat on that progress, we need to scrupulously defend against setbacks and jealously defend important land. And here we are on vitally important land, staring right in the face of an imminent setback. Like many of you, I have met many times with officials at HANSCOM, with the proponents of the development that we're talking about since 2023, early 2023, when I was sworn into office. And at each of these meetings, I have asked the same simple question. How is it that we're going to see either a flatlining or a decrease of private jet volume traffic and of carbon emissions, as you assert, if at the same time we are greatly increasing the amount of private jet infrastructure, and specifically an essential component of that infrastructure, a limiting reactant to that infrastructure, which is the private jet hangar? And in response to that question, I have not received one iota of a semblance of a cogent response. The proponents want you, me, Governor Healy, Secretary Buttigieg, to believe that their industry defies the most basic principles of supply-demand economics, and there's no basis upon which to support that. A couple weeks ago, my family and I had a very special experience. We were invited by the town of Concord, thank you, town of Concord, to participate in the Patriots Day parade. And my wife and I have three very young sons, the oldest of which is 5, and our 5-year-old and our middle child dressed up with 2 of the 5-year-old's friends in, well, they looked like them. And the 5-year-olds marched 3.5 miles from Concord Center, right down there, over around Liberty Street, back to Concord Center, and they did not complain one time, which, if you've ever met a 5-year-old, is a miracle rivaling the shot heard around the world. But if you ask them today what happened there, they will tell you the 5-year-old version of that. And if you look at them while they're explaining it to you, you will see in their faces the beginning of a deep and abiding love for this place. And as a parent, I hope the beginning of a life of stewardship of the American democratic tradition and our planet. You know, people love places to which they develop a deep connection, and they're willing to do what it takes to save places that they love. My constituents love this place and are eager to do whatever we can to protect it. Thank you so much.
So here we are.
I just want to make a note that Ashley's birthday is April 19th. I think she has a lot in common with those people that stood their ground at the bridge. As we are gathered here today to testify to that which is valuable, to that which is worth saving, and to that which is worth protecting, one could not imagine being in the presence of an individual who more abundantly embodies the enormity and generosity of heart, soul, and mind to inexhaustibly care and advocate for that which is most worthy of protection. That being the hope, resiliency, restoration, and renewal of the human spirit and the human condition. Ashley has earned worldwide acclaim as an actor and for her work in the advancement of human rights. She serves as a Goodwill Ambassador for the UN Population Fund, advocating globally for women's sexual and reproductive safety, dignity, rights, and health, and is an outspoken advocate for compassionate mental health awareness and treatment. Her stellar example is that of grace, grit, and selfless giving. She is a true inspiration to all fortunate enough to cross her path. And we are profoundly honored to have her join us here today. Please give a warm welcome to Ashley Judd.
Good morning, Anna. Thank you very much for that extremely kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. Well done. It's almost like we're in the South. I really appreciate being in community and fellowship with you today. In my walk as an advocate, I have learned we can pretend to care. We cannot pretend to show up. And you have indeed shown up. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has designated the Minuteman National Historical Park, Walden, and nearby landmarks as endangered. These sites are not relics of the past. They are wise witnesses of who we were then. They hold the mirror reflecting who we are now, and they inspire us to envision what we want to be tomorrow. The preserved existence of sites like the Old Manse, in front of which I stand, Orchard House, the North Bridge, Lexington Green, and Walden, act as great sages, reminding us that the journey through and trajectory of this American experience with which we find ourselves engaged is not predictable, and it is not linear. We are still a work in progress. The historic sites that the Trust is imploring us to protect today teach us that we can listen and learn from the stories and places that protect and impart from the past, the dreams and the defeats, the aspirations and the successes. The extensive 17th through 19th century storyline of these sites is inclusive, as we heard, of the native Massachusetts tribes, having entrusted their sacred lands to the invading European colonialists. And I acknowledge that I am standing on unceded native lands and the role that my great-grandparents played in that. I am the 10 times great-granddaughter of William and Mary Brewster. The colonial farmers taking up arms against their mother country and one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Ralph Waldo Emerson awakening the cause of self-reliance, and the transcendentalists turning from the pulpit and pews to the natural world and seeking the divine. Henry David Thoreau urging environmental awareness, conservation ethics, and civil disobedience through peaceful protest. Louisa May Alcott breaking through suffocating norms for females in the patriarchal world of publishing to establish herself as the acclaimed writer she was. Pacifist Thoreau publicly defending the acts of John Brown in defiance of slavery, the local townspeople actively engaging in the Underground Railroad and abolitionist movement, and the emancipated African-American Robbins family and Ellen Garrison working to further the promise of equality, independence, and freedom. The founders had declared a century earlier that, indeed, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a declaration made 248 years ago that we are still struggling to fully realize. These sites and the stories of our American experiment remind us that our promises, our intentions, and our hypotheses may not always square with our end results. But these exceptional places and people remind us of America's capacity to improve upon the breadth of our observations and our ability to revisit, reanalyze, revise, and broaden our perspectives. The memory of these people and the preservation of these places catalyze the hope that we can unite in our efforts to further the essential cause of an expanded justice for humanity and inclusive, sustainable development for our planet. I myself have taken much inspiration and guidance from the principles and philosophies that emerged from the thoughtful people who lived, worked, prayed, and played, and contributed to the American canon here. At the University of Kentucky as an undergraduate, having read about the duty and obligation to protest injustice, I organized and led a campus-wide march out of classes to protest to the governor for refusing to remove an old bigot off the Board of Trustees. His granddaughter was my best friend, so it's where I learned how to stand for something without standing against my fellows. In India once at a party for wealthy folks, where I was ambassador for an NGO and we were encouraging them to donate, I learned at the party that a young girl I knew from a brothel had been given to a remand home because her mother had escaped and had gotten the daughter out of the brothel, but the state took the daughter away from the mother, having declared that the pimp back in the brothel was the father. So I nimbly took over the stage at the party with my sex slavery abolitionist friend because the attendees at the party were judges and lawyers and the media. My public voice is deeply informed by the courage of my convictions, which the people who lived here had. And when in my own ancestral land, Eastern Kentucky, the coal mining companies started the malicious practice of blowing up these ancient mountains and then scooping out the thin seams of coal in a practice called mountaintop removal coal mining, I began to listen in homes and meet in threes and libraries. And when they started replacing those mountains with invasive grasses and putting in golf courses, because so many Appalachians play golf, the coal company opening their golf course put up a banner that said, "Ashley Judd takes off her top for a living, why can't we?" I was reminded by the people here that sometimes it is the opposition that helps me define my character. Don't like me, and this aircraft building FBO won't like me, and that's okay. Just ask Harvey. Today, the National Trust is calling our attention to a threat. The double threat that endangers both the sites that define our country and the health, of the very planet that sustains us. The threat involves a massive expansion of luxury private jet infrastructure, 2/3 of a mile in length, 36 football fields in area with the potential to double private jet traffic over these sacred historic sites, while adding 150,000 tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere annually. The egregious irony is not lost on the National Trust, is that such an environmentally unsound project has been proposed to be developed in the midst of the birthplace of the American environmental movement, Walden Pond and Woods. The very site that is known both nationally and internationally as the iconic place and symbol that inspires a clarion call to honor and protect the natural world with which we share. Let me just do that whole thing again. The very site that is known both nationally and internationally as the iconic symbol that inspires a clarion call to honor and protect the natural world we share with all living species. Given the dire warning by climate scientists that our planet is warming even more rapidly than previously predicted, we can no longer ignore the fact that private jet travel is the most carbon-intensive form of transportation we engage in per mile. A single round-trip flight from the US to India on a private plane generates more greenhouse gas emissions than an entire rural family in India generates in their lifetime. This example of population inequity as it relates to perpetrating climate injustice is something we must immediately address and mitigate. Just 1% of the world's population generate half of all global aviation emissions. More than 75% of us have never even flown in a plane. I myself, of course, have flown in a private plane. That was in the past. My values today are different because I know better. 0.0008% of the world's population own a private jet. 60% of all private jets in the world are housed in America. There is absolutely no need and no defensible rationale to further expand infrastructure for private luxury jets at HANSCOM Airport or anywhere. Facing the many challenges we face today as a society, we need to raise our voices, not to vilify. We place principles above personalities. We need to educate ourselves and others to enlist bipartisan understanding and acceptance of the dire perils of inaction and complacency. What happens as a result of the Minuteman Park, Walden, and nearby landmarks endangered listing will set a strong example for how committed we are as a nation to preserve our past and protect our planet and the very future we will pass on to the beloved generations to come. 249 years ago, the shot heard round the world was fired and resulted in our democracy. Now is the time to raise our voices along with the national trusts and engage the freedoms and the representative form of government that the once embattled farmers at the bridge before us fought and died for. Let your voice be heard with mine for these irreplaceable sites to be saved and this jet expansion project to be stopped. Please go to savingplaces.org with me and sign the petition to Massachusetts Governor Healy and U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. Get involved and preserve our historic sites. Thank you so much for including me today. I appreciate your time.
to follow, so it's a good thing I just have my closing comments. So again, we wish to thank Betsy Merritt, Amy Webb, Jennifer Sandy of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Ashley Judd, Representative Cataldo, Congresswoman Trahan, Douglas Brinkley, all our speakers, the Walden Woods Project, Orchard House, Friends of Minuteman Park, the trustees of reservations, the Concord Museum, the Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, Bedford Historical Commission, Superintendent of Minuteman National Historical Park, Simone Montalone, and the Concord Minutemen, and Melissa Saulfield and Alan Bogosian for spearheading the 11 Most Endangered nomination. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for supporting this important cause. Please go to savingplaces.org, sign those petitions, and thank you all.